All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Felicia Gallegos, pronouns she, hers, and I am the Outreach and Prevention Coordinator for the SAAVI office, otherwise known as the Sexual Assault and Anti-Violence Information Office. And I am so happy that you are all here today. This is our third coffee and conversation event, and it's personally my favorite event that we've done this year because it allows us to all come together in this space and have informal conversations about topics that I feel are, and other people on campus feel are important. And so I take a very casual approach to these conversations. So that's everybody grab your coffee, tea, water, whatever it is that you're drinking today. And as we go throughout, feel free to interrupt me at any time, ask questions. Today is going to be somewhat participatory, but also a lot of self reflection happening. But I'm also always open to comments and building as a community together. So feel free to chat, type in the chat box, or unmute and interrupt me at any time. So today's coffee and conversation is I'm not interviewing anybody, which is what I've done for the last coffee and conversations. Today is just a message from me on self-love. Today is actually my birthday, so selfishly, I decided to um, have this message today because I feel like self-love has been quite a journey for me personally. And it's something that oh, thank you, Lauren. But it's something that has always been an up and down journey for me. But coming into my work at SAAVI, and working with survivors of violence, something that I found we all struggle with. Even before SAAVI, I mean, I have friends and female, male, non-binary, all genders struggle with self-love. And so I knew it was there, but then working day in and day out with survivors really emphasized to me the importance of having conversations in the work that I do about self-love as well. It's a conversation we should have no matter what, and it's a conversation that we should have ongoingly throughout our lives. But I thought that I found that is particularly important in the work that I do to have a conversation on self-love, which is why I decided to make it part of this series that SAAVI is hosting. And let me first say that it doesn't matter what amount of self-love you have, whether you are obsessed with yourself or whether you are struggling to love yourself. It is never your fault if someone abuses you. If you find yourself a survivor of sexual abuse or in an abusive relationship, it's not like you could have loved yourself more, or loved yourself less or anything like that to have not have had that happen to you. It is always the sole responsibility of the individual who committed the violence, and is never the survivor's fault. More so, where I found in the work that I do is that when someone, when someone experiences violence, when it after it happens, when it comes to seeking help and seeking support, we often don't feel like good enough. We don't feel like we deserve that support, that love, to go and talk to somebody about what we've been through. And sometimes we even feel like we deserve what we went through, whether it was a sexual assault or an unhealthy relationship or even stalking situations. We sometimes feel like we maybe deserved it. And so that stops us from seeking support. That is never the case. First of all, never, ever, ever the case. And so, but having those thoughts is understandable, and I get it. And it's not ever our responsibility to shame somebody for feeling like they're not good enough or for feeling like they don't deserve the help. We have to empathize with that, but also empower. and remind individuals that they do deserve the love and the support and from others, and very, very most importantly, they deserve to love themselves. So that is what led me to this conversation today. That's the really only gist of like what I'm going to talk about as far as SAAVI like violence today. Really, we're just going to talk about self-love broadly, and just how the freak do we love ourselves, because I feel like it's supposed to be easy, but it's not. So let's talk about it. So I want to start by asking everybody here if you're willing to share, whether you come like unmute yourself or just type in the chat, what makes it hard for us to love ourselves? I'm just going to put it out there broadly. Why is it so hard?
I feel like just comparing like myself to others is like what makes me feel the worst and like not loving myself.
Yeah. Look, everybody in the chat is saying comparison as well. Let's dig deeper on that. Comparison in which ways? Like, what are we comparing when we say that?
I think so like comparing all of like how everyone's saying like social media, it's like comparing everybody's highlights to my like low moments is like what usually happens, and it is
Definitely. Yeah. So if we're looking at social media specifically, I mean, social media is a highlight reel for many. I think we're fortunate to right now be in a time where social media is shifting and some individuals are coming on social media and being more real about things. But for the most part, the majority of social media is still a highlight reel of people's lives. They're not showing the moments where they're insecure or where they're struggling in life, right? And so all we're seeing are the good times, the ups, and when they look their best, when they feel their best, when they're on vacation, when they're, just got a new car, like all the great times. And then we're sitting at home in Netflix, or sitting at home on our couch watching Netflix, like barely survived the day. And we're like, I will never be like that. And so that comparison of our lives through social media is a huge one. Anybody else want to expand on comparison specifically? Oh, Lauren mentioned looks. So comparing looks, I think that happens on social media, but also in person. Definitely. And go ahead, Nicole.
I think for me, another like comparison point is I compare myself to what I used to look like. So like back in high school, before like everything, or like I'm like, oh man, I wish I hadn't cut my hair. I like this old picture of me with long hair. And so there's always like this kind of comparison point, not only to other people, but to like past versions of myself, or like back when I used to do so much and then COVID happened and all of my extracurriculars went away. I'm like, I was doing so much. And now I feel like I'm barely getting by in the day, basically.
100%. And I think that's almost more difficult sometimes because I think we're getting to a point where, there is messaging out there of like, don't compare yourself to others. But when it comes to comparing ourselves to our past selves, it's like, okay, but like I could be that because I was that. Like maybe it's more understanding that I can't be somebody else. Okay, I'm still gonna try, but I know I can't realistically. But I could be who I was. I was that person, definitely. So comparing ourselves to our past versions. Cora, were you gonna say something? I saw that you unmuted.
Oh, I was going to say, I think it's easy, like from a social media standpoint, to compare yourself to unrealistic versions. Like, take the Kardashians. Like, I mean, Khloe Kardashian just got all that plastic surgery on her face, and like none of that is real. And I think it's easy to compare that side too.
Yeah. And even if it's not, celebrities who are getting plastic surgery done, but just the amount of editing that's available and even just filters, that it doesn't have to be outside editing apps like Snapchat filters or Instagram filters that alter the way we look. And we're comparing to that, which don't get me wrong, I am all for a filter. Okay. I love a filter, but it's being realistic that when you're consuming that media, like you have to like put a filter in your brain that like what I'm looking at right now is not what that person actually looks like. But it's hard for our brain because we just see that and we're like, that's what we should look like. Definitely. Comparison is huge. And I think like what I wanted to get at with comparison too is comparison is not just physically comparing, which I think is something that we do quickly. It's the first thing that we do when we see somebody else, whether that's in person or on social media. But we compare almost every aspect of who we are, right? We look and see what people are doing with their life. That person seems more outgoing than I am. They look like they are traveling more than I am. I wish I could do that. I wish I was more involved. I wish, right? There's all comparison on more levels than just physical. But physical is definitely there as well. Let's see, why else is it hard for us to love ourselves? Let me look at the chat. I like what Elle said about just seeing what perfect should be and comparing ourselves to that. And I would expand that, not even just what we see on social media as perfect, but also what we've been taught growing up is perfect. I think sometimes the standards of what we were raised on as being perfect play a huge role. I know for me, my first year when I came to college at Utah State was like, I had the biggest identity crisis because I was just like, okay, I'm no longer under my parents' roof. I know I don't want to be like complete opposite of who my parents wanted to be. Like I still want to be good. Like I still want to do things that they want me to do, but also like there's things that my parents wanted me to be that I don't want to be, and just like navigating that. But to me, like perfect was the standard my parents set, and it was really hard to get out of like fitting that standard that they set for me. But yeah, exactly. Elle, like perfect grades, what your relationships should look like, what your family relationship should look like, friends, college, your career. Yeah, everything. This like perfect, whatever the box is for you, right? I remember one of my biggest struggles was navigating my relationship with my mom when my first year of coming to college, because me and her, like growing up, I grew up with a single mom, and me and her were just like two peas in a pod like my whole life. And then figuring out, what our relationship looked like once I moved out, I was like, I can't be a two pea in a pod with you anymore. Like I need my own life. And but then I felt like I was no longer perfect because I wasn't that perfect daughter anymore that was like her best friend. And so then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst daughter ever. I can't be a perfect daughter. I can't be perfect anything. Like there's so many levels to perfection beyond what we look like. And I think especially for those of you that have grown up in Utah, or even if you didn't grow up in Utah, you're here now. Welcome. Perfection capital of the world. There is this pressure here for perfection. I remember I was talking to my partner the other day, and he is from Florida, and we were talking about grades. And he was like, C's get degrees. That's what we grew up learning. And I was like, yeah, in Utah, if you don't get an A, you're like shamed. It's like shame from everybody, like growing up. And he was like, what? That's so toxic. For us, it was like pass and you're good. I was like, yeah, we have a perfection problem here. And so just really navigating that perfection standard is so hard, and realizing, this is what the world around me says is perfect, but what's good for me. And also good enough is good enough. Okay. Let's see, what else makes it hard for us to love ourselves. Oh, Nicole, situations in the past where people made us feel like we were hard to love or not worth loving. Moment of snaps. Or wait, I don't know who's in the room. I think it was my sophomore year. My half my roommates were Alpha Chi, half my roommates were Kappa Delta. So I would just always do this. So I was inclusive. But yes, past experiences for sure, whether that's relationships, like intimate relationships we've had, our parents, even friends, just anything in the past where we felt or been told directly that we're hard to love or we're not good enough. Definitely. So, I think it's just important for each of us to think about, why it is hard for us to love ourselves. We don't just sit on it forever because that's not fun for anybody. But it's good to recognize, there are reasons that make it hard for me to love myself that aren't my responsibility, right? Like growing up in a perfection standard, I can't control that. I can't control, probably for all of everyone here, the majority of the reasons that you find it difficult to love yourselves, you have no control over. But you do have the control over how you respond, right? You have the ability to think, I know I grew up in this space. I had these experiences that made it difficult for me to love myself, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of me loving myself. It may set me back sometimes, but I'm going to continue to move forward. So I want us to do an exercise. I call this, we're just going to do like a self-assessment. And for those of you that have had trainings with me before about boundaries, we're coming back to them a little bit, but in a different way. So we're going to go through the different categories of boundaries and look at them a little bit differently. In the past, we've looked at boundaries as between us and other individuals. But right now, we're just going to look at these categories within ourselves. And we're going to do a self-analysis, and we're going to look at each one of these categories and think, where am I at now in this category? And where do I want to be? And that's just what we're going to do right now. And then I'll give you the next steps in a minute. But for example, the first category we're going to look at is going to be physical. And you can get out a piece of paper. I have a piece of paper. I'm going to do it with you because self-love is a journey, as I mentioned at the beginning. Okay. We can always continuously look over or reassess our self-love. So physical is the first category. So when you're thinking about physical, I want you to think about how you think about the way that you look, maybe even how you are taking care of your body, how you view taking care of your body, right? Do you view exercise as something like that you have to do, or do you exercise to take care of your body as a way to move your body and it makes you happy? Or are you in a space where exercising and taking care of your body is a chore or something like a punishment? Are you in this space too, or when you're thinking about where you're at now, also think about how you look at your body in compared to others, right? We talked about comparison. Are you constantly beating down on your body, talking negatively about your body? And what parts of your body are you talking negatively about, right? So I know it's a little uncomfortable, but I want you to be honest about physically, where are you at right now? And then the second part is, where do you want to be? Think like, you can even break it down. I don't know how organized you like to be, but like 3 months, 6 months, a year, or just generally overall, where do you want to be with your physical journey, your physical outlook on yourself, your physical self-love? Do you want, and you can like look at those same categories, right? Do you want to be in a space where you exercise because you want to be healthy, but you don't want to exercise because it feels like a chore? Or do you want to actively appreciate your body and have positive self-talk rather than negative self-talk towards your body? These different examples. Does anybody have questions about the exercise? Okay, so just take like a minute or two to do this. You can always go back if we don't have enough time on these categories. Like, you can always go back after we're done here and write more, but just take a minute or two to fill in this section. Again, we're looking at physical, self-assessment. Where are you now and where do you want to be with your self-love, your physical self-love. And I'm gonna do it with you. And make sure to drink your coffee, your tea, your water. We're about 1 minute in, so if you want to move to looking at where you want to be, start writing there if you haven't yet. Okay, so I'm going to bring us back. I know that's nowhere near enough time, but just so we can get through all the categories. Does anybody, and you do not have to, but does anybody want to share what they wrote for either question with the group? And again,
I'll share something.
okay.
So I am a special education major, and one of the things we really focus on in like our curriculum and in the classroom is the idea of we're not fixing our students, we're accepting them and helping them live in this world better. And as I was writing this, I was like, why am I not like applying the same standard to myself? Like, we shouldn't have the goal of I need to exercise to fix myself. Like, I should exercise because I love myself and I want to be healthy. So that was really profound for me.
I love that. Most definitely. Thank you for sharing. I think that that's something that all of us can keep in mind, that it's not about fixing ourselves. It's just about being healthy and loving ourselves. Exercise should be an act of self-love. And if we're not doing it as an act of self-love, maybe it shouldn't be to fix us. Anybody else want to share? Okay. And I think as we go through this, I do want to know, and I will say this 100 more times because we need to hear it. As you do this self-assessment and have these moments of truth with yourself, I want you to practice radical self-acceptance. Radical self-acceptance. Radical self-acceptance is all about honoring where you're at and without judgment and with grace. And I think it's really important for us, especially when we're in a place where we're looking at where we're at currently and also acknowledging where we want to be. It can be easy for us to start to shame ourselves for where we're at if we are not in a place where we want to be, right? And that is not the purpose of the exercise. You have to accept yourself in every stage of your self-love journey, because you're there for a reason. You are meant to be right where you are, whether you are thriving, 30, flirty, and thriving, or you are struggling. You are meant to be right where you are at. And we have to, self-love starts with accepting every stage that we're in. And so if you're not where you're meant to be and you are exercising to fix yourself, which, trust me, I am there. Sometimes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm there to fix myself. And then Thursday, I'm like, Felicia, you should be exercising to love yourself. So Thursday, Friday, I'm there to love myself. And then Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm there to fix myself, but I'm going to accept where I'm at and just continually strive to get to a spot where every day is for love. But I'm not going to shame myself while I'm not there yet. Does that make sense? So as we go through this, I don't want anybody to be shaming themselves for where they're at, because that is not the purpose at all. We have to have radical self-acceptance along our whole self-love journey. Even when we're not being the best at loving ourselves, we still have to offer ourselves grace and acceptance. Okay. So the next category that I want us to move into is emotional. So this is looking at maybe our self-talk, how we are talking to ourselves, how we are allowing others to talk to us, how we are taking care of our maybe mental health, our emotional well-being. So where are we at with that now? And where would we like to be? So we'll take 2 minutes again to just answer those two questions. And again, I know that we just talked about physical, so it can be easy to use emotional to focus on physical again, which is fine. You can do that. But also thinking back to all the different categories in which we can compare ourselves, or maybe negative self-talk, right? It isn't always physical. Maybe we're talking negatively about ourselves because we just don't feel like we're good enough for people, or that we're worthy, or different things like that. We are at the 1 minute mark, so shifting to where you want to be with your emotional self-love. All right. Let's bring it back. Does anybody want to share within this category what they wrote?
Yeah, I'll share. So I feel like I'm in an interesting place in my life where I am finally like starting, like I'm able to accept myself for who I am and like not really feel that much pressure to fit in. But that, because I've lived 19 years of not feeling that way, feels really just like uncomfortable. Like I'm like, well, like pause, like this is so weird. Should I like be feeling like comfortable right now? So like my goal is just to start working on like becoming comfortable with being comfortable with myself while still pushing myself to grow.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. I actually just had this conversation with a friend about, and once you get to a place where you feel confident, like standing up for who you are, you almost feel bad that you're standing up for yourself or feel like weird. And so that's definitely a real space, but allowing again that radical self-acceptance, I'm in this space, and then eventually you'll get to a space where that becomes the normal, right? And then you can encourage others to also stand up for themselves. And, you don't have to fit in because everybody else is doing that. Like, I promise, like, stand up for yourself. And, but so often when we start to feel those uncomfortable feelings, we're just like, oh, I'm going to go back to what everybody else is doing. So thank you for acknowledging that. I think that's important, way important for us to be acknowledging as a society in general. Anybody else want to share? I know one thing for me has been to just share my emotions. I think for a long time, and it ebbs and flows depending on the person, honestly, but one thing I would encourage you all is to start being real with yourself about how you feel about situations and to share that. I spent way too long in my life trying to convince myself that I didn't feel the way I felt in relationships or in situations. And that was often to, appease other people or to not disturb the peace. But learning to, first of all, be honest with myself and then about how I was feeling, and then finding the courage to express those emotions that I was feeling as I felt them has actually, I thought, would push people away, but it has actually strengthened relationships because people appreciate the honesty and the authenticity and the genuineness when you are real with your emotions. And then it allows them space to also be real with their emotions. Emotional maturity, it's crazy what it can do to a society. Anybody else want to share? I just want to make sure I don't cut anybody off. Okay. So the next category that we have is intellectual. So intellectually, and this is fitting because we're all in college. Well, I'm not anymore. Me pretending that I'm part of this school. But where are you at now? Where do you want to be? Yeah, self-assessment. And this doesn't necessarily have to be literally like I'm about to graduate, I want to go to my master's. It can also just be, what do you want to learn more about? Where do you want to grow in your intellectual thinking? Maybe your degree is in business, but you want to learn more about social justice, right? Something that's not completely different. They overlap more than you think, but something maybe that you're not studying every day. So just intellectually, where do you want to grow and where are you now?
I'll say something real quick if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm in the car right now. But growing intellectually, I would say that as of lately, I've been wanting to grow intellectually, but not in the sense of like, oh my gosh, I want to learn more about statistics kind of thing. It's been more about like trying to find my passions again, because like tough times have hit, when you're a survivor, tough times hit, and I've just like lost a lot of my passions. So I've been really using this time for myself to like discover more, like, what do I want to learn about, what actually interests me. And I've gone out on a limb this semester and I was like, you know what, let's try snowboarding. Let's see if we can develop ourselves intellectually and physically there. And I ended up loving it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is something I could be passionate about. And just having that one moment has helped me realize that I can keep going forward and finding new things to try, because I thought I was just like too old to do any of that. But it makes me want to go out and learn more.
Yeah. I love that. No, and that's a good point. Like, intellectual is something that you will never stop. Like, and you will always, one thing I learned, I thought when I graduated school and started this job, I was like, this is the work I want to do. This is exactly what I've been like waiting for. And I started this work and I'm like, wait, but I have 25 other passions now. And it's just, you think you've reached or like met your passion and like started your passion, and then there will be something else. And or maybe you start in what you thought was your passion of work and or education, and then you'll be like, this is not it. Like, I started at Utah State going into the education program, and then I was like, actually, this is not it. As much as I loved the education program, it just was not it wasn't the exact path I wanted, right? And so that's something that will always be a learning journey. It's something that will always go up and down, and that it will always change. Anybody else want to share anything for that one?
I feel like right now I'm like in a space where I'm like super motivated to like grow like my career development and like talk to a bunch of like people and figure out kind of what I want to do because I'm a sophomore. But I feel like just like with the world around me, I feel super like paralyzed of just being like, I can't do what I want right now. So then like day to day, I'm not motivated, but then long term I am. So it like kind of sends me into a spiral that can be really frustrating. So I just want to like be able to like work on focusing on like the long term, like in my day to day and like doing what I can at least.
Yeah, that is so incredibly valid. And I think that what a wonderful opportunity for you to focus on, like your emotional well-being and like, okay, I'm in this space where I feel a little bit paralyzed by everything going on, which is valid. You are not alone. I don't know about everybody in this group, but I felt like that so much. And so this is a time to say, I don't have to be doing everything on my career-wise, right? How can I develop tools right now? Because I can guarantee you there will be times later on in your life too where you feel paralyzed by everything. And so gaining those tools of like, what can I do today that will prepare me for tomorrow? And that's another thing with self-love. I mean, even just going through these categories, it can be like, there's so much I have to do to love myself. I can't do it all. And then you're like, I can't love myself because I can't do all these things in these categories. And I don't want you to feel like that either. Self-love sometimes is just like, I can't do anything today, but like emotionally love myself. And that's going to include laying on the couch and watching Netflix. That's all I can do today. And that is a huge moment of self-love, is just recognizing that that's where you're at, especially in a society that is telling you that you need to be in every category, loving yourself at max capacity every single day. You need to be doing everything to be able to really be in tune with yourself and be like, actually loving myself today means not going to the gym, means taking a sick day from work and from school and just laying on the couch. That's what self-love for me is today, right? Okay, so the next category I want us to look at is relationships. So this can be friendships, our family relationships, our intimate relationships. Where are you now? Who are you in those relationships? How are you supporting those people? How are you showing up in those spaces with those people? Good, bad, medium. And where do you want to be? And I'll
say one more thing. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, you go, queen.
No, you go.
Okay, I'll make it fast. Don't worry, I'm zippy. So recently, I went through like this really terrible, awful breakup. And
I'm sorry.
I don't know, I just kind of learned during that time, like, okay, I do have other relationships in my life. I do have more people in my life than I think I do. And it was kind of like the perfect timing when I joined Alpha Chi, because I have just been able to like surround myself with like a great support system. And I just have like these awesome friends now who like always constantly hype me up. And I realized too with that is like when I was in that relationship, I wasn't getting that validation. I wasn't getting that, like, not attention, but words of affirmation happens to be my love language. And I wasn't getting like my needs met with my love language. And it's just really cool because it took something, yeah, that sucked and that was terrible, for me to realize like, oh my gosh, there are more people out there who are actually like willing to put in the same amount of effort into me as I do in other people.
Yeah. And been there, done that as well. And I think that that comes down to, you know, I always say like breakups are in the moment seem like the worst thing to ever happen in the history of history. But ultimately, it is very rare for me to meet somebody who's been through a breakup who, on the other side of healing from that, didn't love themselves more, at least a smidgen. And it's unfortunate that for so many of us, it takes a breakup for us to lean on ourselves. But a silver lining in a breakup is that most individuals find that love for themselves through a breakup. Even if that love simply comes from the fact that you survived the breakup, it's like, girl, you did that. So love yourself. I think because of that, your next relationships become stronger because after each breakup you go through, you realize that self-love grows and you realize what you deserve more and more. But I also want us all to do exercises like this more often so we can grow that self-love outside of a relationship and we can gain that self-efficacy, that self-belief in ourselves so that we know what we deserve before we go into a relationship, so that we know like my love language is words of affirmation. And I'm going to be somebody who respects that and honors that and tells me I'm pretty every 5 seconds because I need that. And that's where, you know, this self-love ties into relationships. When we have a solid love of ourselves, it makes it easier for us to stand up for ourselves in relationships and to speak for ourselves in relationships when we need more from our partner. Or it also helps us love others better because we know we can encourage our partners to love themselves. I have told my partner many times, like, if you need more from me, you can tell me that. I'm not going to get hurt. I'm not going to get offended because that's just an act of you loving yourself, is you speaking up for yourself, right? Or telling me that you need me to tell you you're pretty every 5 seconds. I can tell you that. Just because you're a man, I can still tell you you're pretty every 5 seconds. That's fine. We're dismantling masculinity in this household, okay? Anyways, so relationships. What else did anybody write down? Anybody else want to share? Relationships. I think it's important to recognize that it is really easy in relationships for us when we, especially in relationships that have like conflict, for us to automatically start to blame the other person. And this, let me put the caveat, I am not talking about relationships that are abusive in nature. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, if there is sexual violence or relationship violence happening, it is the sole responsibility of the perpetrator of the violence, is never your fault. But when we're talking about relationships where you're having, you know, minor tiffs with like friends or family members, it's much easier for us to just point out what the other person is doing wrong, because that's who we are as humans. We don't ever want to be doing anything wrong. We are perfect, right? When we acknowledge that we're doing something wrong in a relationship, it goes against that perfection standard and narrative that we feel like we have to meet. And then that violates our self-love. If I'm not perfect, I can't love myself. And it's just like this internal battle. So what do? We just blame everybody else. So again, radical self-acceptance. Don't hate yourself for blaming everybody around you for the problems in relationships, because it's natural. And also, it's important for us to look in our relationships and think, how am I showing up in this space? Am I being someone who I would want to be friends with? Am I communicating in a way that is healthy for the relationship? Am I validating and seeking to understand a person when conflict is present? And, am I showing up how I'm expecting them to show up? And just looking at that and practicing to become somebody who is that. And if you are being that person in a relationship, it's fair, you deserve that back as well from them, from the other person. And that is ultimately what a healthy relationship would look like. So just thinking about, who are you in your relationships? Is that who you want to be? And don't shame yourself if you haven't been that person. If like I mentioned at the beginning, when I first came to school, me and my mom had a really hard relationship because I was trying to, distance myself from her. And in doing that, I really pushed her away and was rude and mean in certain times. And I had to do that to discover that wasn't the way to go, but ultimately acknowledge that wasn't who I wanted to be in that relationship. And then I was able to move forward with apologies and, becoming who I wanted to be in that relationship. So just making sure, a part of self-love, if we're not showing up in the relationships in our life as who we want to be, right? If we're being that friend who is talking negatively behind people's backs, or we're being that friend who we don't like, we're going to have a hard time loving ourselves. Like when that happened to my mom, even when I tried to ignore it, I just always felt bad, because I was like, this is not the daughter I want to be. I don't want to be mean to my mom, right? So that's what I mean by looking at your relationship self-love, is thinking about, who am I showing up as in my relationships? Okay, so we're almost out of time. So I'm just going to do one more category. And then I'll tell you, there's a couple other I'll tell you, and then you guys can do those on your own. But we'll do one more as a group. So the next category is online. So social media. So who are you now? Who are you showing up as online? And who do you want to be? Or what do you want to be portraying? And maybe that's, I don't want to be online, but I feel pressure to also think of that. Okay, we've got about 1 more minute left. So thinking about, transitioning to who do you want to be or where do you want to be? Okay, does anybody want to share?
I feel like online, like the person, like I feel like I portray myself like accurately and I'm happy with that. But my relationship with like social media and stuff, like sometimes I'll look at things that I know are gonna hurt my own feelings. Like I'll be like, go to Snap Maps, be like, it's Friday night, I'm in my room, let's see which of my friends are hanging out. And then I'll like hurt my own feelings and stuff like that. Knowing full well I'm doing that. And I just really want to work on like how like my relationship with like how I spend time on like online and social media, as well as like what I spend my time looking at, because I could like ignorance is bliss, but I don't know why I choose to not do that.
Yeah, no, that is a very real thing. It is, it is very difficult to break that habit of checking where like what people are doing, and it's almost like I want to self-loathe. I just feel like the Grinch when he's like laying on his bed and he's like, I have to like hate myself. I can't cancel that. And it's just, I don't know why we do that, but it's definitely, well, it's human behavior. But I will say everybody doing a social media cleanse, really looking at what you're consuming, when you're consuming it, is so incredibly beneficial. About 6 months before the pandemic hit, I went through and deleted so many people, or muted, at least muted people that I didn't want to know that I didn't want them to know I deleted them, but I just muted them. And then I started following more like more diverse perspectives and opinions, right? So neurodiverse individuals of different backgrounds and skin colors and just experiences from all around the world and different bodies than me. And it has been incredible. My social media, my Instagram specifically, has become such a positive space where I go on and I'm like, I know if I go on here right now, I'm going to see a bunch of people showing their true bodies and like, look at all my stretch marks, look at all my rolls, and I still love myself. And it's like, okay, this is the messaging I need, right? Whereas before it was a lot more of the comparison game when I got on social media. And that was hard because at first I was like, but I like the comparison. Okay, it's motivation. It's like, I want to be that girl, but I had to ultimately just be like, but at the end of the day, it's not helping my mental health. Anybody else want to share? Okay. So the final 4 categories that you guys can do on your own is financially, or financial. So just how you're spending your money, all of that fun stuff. We love that. But where do you want to be? And then, is someone, Lauren, did you want to say something? No? Okay. And then the next one is sexually, sexual, materials, and then spiritual. So those are the last 4 categories to look at. And again, this is all about radical acceptance. Okay, so doing this analysis, and I encourage you, I do an analysis like this once a month, or I at least try to. Again, if I forget, radical self-acceptance. Okay, we're not perfect. But it really is so important. Self-love is, and it is something that we have to do actively. It's unfortunately not necessarily something that just comes for us. And sometimes it comes easier than other times, but until it is easy and just something that is present, doing exercises like this where you can look at, where am I at? Where can I be? And then looking at all of that and saying, and I love you. I love where you are. I love where you've been. I love where you're at. And I love where you're trying to be, right? That radical self-acceptance. Too often we look back at where we've been, where we are, and where we want to be, and we think things like, I wish I was still there, or I can't believe I did that, or I can't believe I'm where I'm at. Why am I here? What am I doing? I'll never get there. Like these types of thoughts, rather than writing it all out. This is where I've been. This is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. And just looking at it all and saying like, thank you. I love you for this journey. Like that is self-love. And your journey, where you've been, where you are, and where you are trying to go might not be the stereotypical box that society thinks you should be in, and might not be the plan that you thought you should be on, but it's exactly where you're meant to be. And that's why you should be saying thank you and I love you, no matter where you're at on that box, or wherever you're at on that journey, because it really is, I promise, where you're meant to be. So many things have happened for me in my life that I was like, what? That was not meant to happen. And I've been so many versions of myself where I was like, ew, who is that girl? Like, bye, Felicia. I do not like that version of me. But, and I could sit here all day and be like, shame on her, shame on that experience. Ew, ew, ew. I can't believe, like, but why? Why? When rather I could just look back at all of it. I could sit with all that's here in front of me and just say, thank you. Like, we're here, girl, we made it to today. And thank you. And I love you. Right. So that's really the purpose of this exercise, is to just do that assessment, look at where you're at, where you've been, where you're going, and just thank you. And I love you. So love yourself because you owe it to yourself, girls. Any other questions for me? That's all I had for today. So thanks so much for joining this coffee and conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.